Welcome to the Nexus Project, a contemporary marketing conversation with John Ghiorso.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the Nexus Project. So in this episode, I interview Sandy Carter. Sandy is the COO and head of business development at a company called Unstoppable Domains. She's an expert in all things Web3 and has a really impressive career as a senior leader across tech companies, AWS, IBM, just to name a few. She was recognized as one of the top 10 most powerful women in tech and has fluency in 8 different programming languages. So in this show, we kind of center the theme on Web3, but the goal is really to cut through the noise and the hype cycle and really get to what is practical, what is applicable for today's business leaders. Of course, we get into some interesting kind of where is this going stuff, but we try to avoid, I think both of us, any of that, 10-year out science fiction kind of future stuff and focus the conversation on what matters between tomorrow and 24 months from now. So if you're a Web3 skeptic, if you were on the sidelines during the hype cycle, I think this is an important conversation. There is real underlying value in this technology. It may have been overhyped, but it's not going anywhere. And I think Sandy does a great job of giving us the practical perspective on where we're at today. All right, Sandy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, John. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, let's dive right into it. I'd like to kind of bracket this conversation broadly around Web3, just with kind of a current state of the nation. We've been pretty whipsawed by a hype cycle in Web3 over the last couple years. I think by definition, these hype cycles are overly optimistic at their peak and overly pessimistic at their trough. You get a lot of headlines, this is going to change everything, to this was a total, dud and it doesn't mean anything. I think both those are wrong. But where do you come down on this? What's your sort of sober, practical take about where we're at in kind of the Web3 world today, and then where we're going over the next, let's say, not the 10-year future, but next couple years?
Yeah, well, I definitely don't think that this is going to be a bust in Web3. I think that Web3 will continue to rise. And I think there's a couple of reasons I believe that. First, I think there's been some really interesting legal and regulatory or policy changes made. So, we saw Coinbase, and they secured a regulatory victory with the National Futures Association. I thought it was really fascinating what they're able to do now in terms of selling crypto futures, which I think is really interesting. I also think the win, and I know it wasn't a full win, but there was a win with XRP from Ripple. And I think that that's really interesting because I think that sent kind of a ripple of optimism throughout the broader Web3 community as well. So I think
broadly then,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so broadly kind of from a regulatory perspective, then you feel like things are they improving or they're just not getting worse? What's your kind of headline on that?
Well, I think both the Coinbase decision and the Ripple decision. Ripple was a legal decision. Coinbase was really more of a policy decision, with the National Futures Association. So I think that those are positive steps forward. I don't think that those are, let's stay the ground. I think that those are positive steps forward. Now, that being said, I always want to present both sides of the coin. The SEC, for example, has said they're going to turn their focus first to AI. They had been fully honed on crypto, then they turned their focus to AI. And so, I don't think we're out of the woods yet, but I do feel like that's a really powerful message. That says that was 2 interesting pushes forward on the industry overall. Now, the other clarity here, John, as well, I would say, is that Web3 is not just crypto, right? Web3 doesn't equal crypto. Web3 has inside of it, blockchain. One use case of blockchain is crypto. The second reason that I feel that there is a lot more potential in Web3 is because of some of the use cases that the technology brings to the table. Every time you see a new technology come out, it's all about Web3, Web3, Web3. You know that a technology has matured when people aren't talking about the technology, but they're talking about the use case. So, for example, for me, Web3 does better loyalty than does Web2. And that's because of blockchain and because of the way that you can truly identify a user and truly reward the user. I think digital identity truly done better through Web3, right? Establishing that verification through a blockchain-based domain. I think that is much more powerful using Web3 than using Web2. And then, we have some other use cases that I think are interesting to see. Coinbase just announced friend.tech. I don't know if you saw that or not. They have some of these access to exclusive chat rooms. And I think that this is really interesting because it's token gated. So again, I think that kind of reveals that maybe there is some staying power in Web3 because of the things you can do with it versus it's just a cool technology.
Yeah, that's okay. That's awesome. And I think it sounds like all those are applicable today. I think one of the big, and I think it's a fair criticism of the hype around Web3 is like, oh, just wait, this will happen. And if everything the technology is doing is based on some unrealized science fiction future, at some point people throw their hands up and go, okay, but where are we really at? So along those lines, and you mentioned this, but I want to kind of dive into it. When I think of the overall kind of Web3 space, and in particular, NFTs in different ways they've been used, for me, there's clearly parts of that were, the greater fool theory, like it's speculation. It's I'm going to sell this for double in a month, and the next guy's going to sell it for double, and that more or less collapsed. But there's an underlying, a different component of this that's really around communities and different ways to kind of incentivize and build communities. And that's something, from my outside looking in perspective, I mean, communities and exclusivity and access and, networking, that's been something that's, been around for all of human history in some way or another. So to me, that's a really compelling use case. Can you talk about kind of practical ways that's happening today? And I know you've shared some examples of, I think, blue chip brands too, who've kind of taken advantage of that.
Yeah. So I do believe that the community for Web3 is really important. In fact, when I came over to from Web2 to Web3, Amazon Web Services, for example, I thought I knew community really, really well. And I believe I did, but I think Web3 raises the bar again on community. In Web3, the community is the project and the project is the community. So I do see that communities here are stronger, a lot driven by DAOs, because the community gets to not just give input, but it gets to get its hands dirty and be in there with you. And so when you produce a roadmap, like at AWS, we used to say 90% of our roadmap was produced by listening to customers, which is a brilliant thing. But when you say, 100% of my roadmap is built with the community, that's a powerful thing too, right? That's a really big superpower. And we see that from NFT communities, Utes just did a big release, Lazy Lions. You see that from the NFT community, but you also see that broader as well. I think, as you look at loyalty, so I'd bring this also back to loyalty. The reason you see the Starbucks and the IHOPs and the Nikes using Web3 for loyalty is because the technology is better. You know who your community is. I was just working early this morning with a company, and for their loyalty program, they have a physical passbook. So it's a piece of paper and they put stamps in the passbook. And what they were telling me, first of all, is that people lose that passbook a lot. So they have to replace it. So it's costly. And then, I use the passbook and then I say, okay, John, here, you go and get your free ice cream. You run in with the same passbook. And so you really don't know who your community is. And I think for building that community and for understanding who's really buying and rewarding them, Web3 is just better technology to do that. And I think that's why it will eventually win in those spaces, because it's better technology, not because it's new, not because it's, cool, but because it is better technology.
Yeah. So it sounds like then from the kind of community loyalty perspective, we're talking about everything from 20 people getting together to build some super niche video game and doing it in a different incentive structure so they all kind of have ownership, all the way to 50 million customers in a Starbucks loyalty program. That's super interesting. I mean, anything more you can say around that? Because I think I want to get to kind of the core, like, why is blockchain better? And it sounds like it's kind of incentives. It's like the ability to verify who they say they are and single account. Like, anything else you can say about, loyalty programs have been around for a long time. These, web-based communities, and whether it's chat room, Reddit forums or whatever, have been around for 20 years. But what is it specifically about blockchain technology that kind of enables this stuff in a better way?
Well, so what you kind of mentioned or talked about is social verification, right? Or trust verification. So if you think about the market today, and it has been this way for a long time, but it's growing now because of AI, because of all the fake news that's out there and all the bots that are out there. And, funny story, John. So, the Pope posted, he didn't post, but, they thought that was him in his puffer jacket. And a week before, I was at a red carpet event in Los Angeles. And I didn't realize it was going to be cold in Los Angeles. And the only thing I had brought is a puffer jacket that I had taken from my trip to Seattle. So I had a puffer jacket on over this beautiful dress. Someone took a picture and I posted it going, oh, my daughter said that this is a new style. This is high-low, whatever high-low is. So I posted it. I mean, it went viral. And then, of course, a week later, the Pope was appearing in a puffer jacket. It turned out that picture was fake. That was a fake picture someone had created with the Pope. Well, the interesting thing was not only was that picture fake, people then questioned my picture. Like, is that a real picture? Were you really in a puffer jacket with that dress? Or did you fake it too? And so what I love about the blockchain is the blockchain does enable verification of who is leveraging what. So for example, being able to verify that picture was my picture, that picture was actually me. I was actually wearing the puffer. You can now do that with blockchain technology, or verify a quote, or verify a tweet. Whatever you need can be done through the blockchain. And it's because of the power of the hashing technology that's really designed into blockchain that you're able to tell if something's been altered or changed. And then using credentialed or verifiable data, you can actually attribute that to a person. So I think that's very powerful. I think we're going to start to see more and more of that. I was just asked to do a keynote at an AI summit. And you're like, what? Like, you're unstoppable domains. Why were you keynoting at an AI summit? Well, the reason I was keynoting is the number one concern of CEOs around the world around AI is this whole concept of deepfakes. And how, if somebody comes out with something about their company, how do they show that that's not real and that won't hurt them? Well, this verifiable credentialed is really the way to go to verify that this came from my company, whatever my company is, and this was really said by me.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I know the deepfake conversation is an interesting one, because I feel like there's been a conversation around it for, 5 or 6 years. There's been fear around, even in the last election cycle, there was a lot of fear that, there's going to be all these deepfakes and it's going to cause all this disinformation.
And
but
I think
the technology wasn't quite there. Right.
Yeah.
And now it finally, like, the Pope picture is, I think, one of those breakout moments where it's like, oh, this is this is actually tricking people. It's good enough. And, video, that was an image. Video's right around the corner. So this all of a sudden has become a really important issue to solve like now, or we're going to live in a world where no one knows what's true. I mean, and that's kind of a scary world to live in. So, that's fascinating. On the, the other part of that, the incentive part, I find that also super interesting. Like these communities can be directly incentivized. The crowdfunding thing never like really took off, right? It still is around and kind of gets used for specific use cases, but there was a thought for a while that those platforms were going to sort of change retail and the way products were made, and they kind of got pigeonholed into this somewhat niche use case. But do you think that dream maybe kind of finally realized in terms of having communities directly incentivized doing projects, building companies? You mentioned DAOs, which for those that don't know, I mean, all my layman's view is like kind of a Web3 based LLC, basically. But anyway, I know a long-winded question, but how do you think about kind of the incentive structure and how that changes things?
Oh, I think it's, when Web3 is widely adopted, I think it turns the entire incentive structure on its head. And the reason is, today I've been a chief marketing officer before. And, how do you market to someone? Well, you typically buy a list. Could be a list from Google, could be a list from Meta. You buy a list. And then once you have that list, then you go through and you try to reduce fraud from the list. And then you eventually get to the consumer that you give some sort of coupon to, right? Some sort of discounted coupon to. And so that has been the way that things work. But when you enter a Web3 world, and so for your layman, as you call them, the Web3 world, you own your data. So I own my data, not a company, not a platform, but I own the data. So now I get incented for sharing that data. And don't think this is a far way off. This is available today, right? So for example, if I share that I went to 2 concerts, I might get a t-shirt or a super fan VIP seat because of that. And that's really incentivizing me to share my data. I've seen people leverage a very great example. If you had a certain ticket, you got in line first for a selfie with a particular, really famous person because you had that data. Or even just simple things. I've seen applications now in the Web3 world give a 10% discount because you're going to share particular data. I think this really turns the world on its head. Marketing and sales, business development, customer support, customer service, all of these things, because now you're not buying a list. Now you're using that money to entice the person to make a decision and to move forward.
Yeah, and it's that really like that 100% verifiable direct communication with the customer is, I mean, that is kind of the holy grail for, community building and incentives and really, I mean, broadly marketing. I agree. If that's where are we at today? I mean, that it sounds like that is a doable, scalable thing if any consumer facing company is kind of willing to take it on.
So I would say, today we're in the early stages. I say we're in the modem stages, but then I had someone raise their hand and say, "What's a modem?" So we're in the very, very, very early days. So we're not, in the mature cycle. We're starting to get some maturity, but we're very early on. I think today, Web 2 applications are still in use and there's still data being taken. But I would say, John, the next generation is going to change that. Like I watch my daughters and they're very wary of what they share. It's really interesting. They do a lot of stuff in Roblox and, getting Robux so they can build their bedroom of the future. But they don't want to share data. Or if they do share it, they want to be rewarded for it. It's a whole different mindset, like what they value, how they value it, what's important. So I think we're probably maybe that next generation that's going to come up and make some changes because of what they believe and how they believe it. So it may not happen with our hybrid, where we have our current generation and that next generation. But I think when that generation comes forward, I think we'll see some changes. So we're probably 5 years away, maybe 7, something like that, from where marketeers and sellers and customer support people have to think differently to get that data from the customer.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. And actually, that was you set me up for my next question here, which was the intersection of Web3 and the metaverse. And just to kind of set this up, more often than not, they're conflated. Is you kind of need one to have the other, and vice versa. Roblox, I think, is a great example of, let's call it a proto metaverse, right? Already a huge amount of adoption. Is it the metaverse? No, but it is. If you squint a little bit, it's like it looks like the thing that might lead to the thing that is ultimately the metaverse, as it's been kind of, the grand vision of it. So let's call it a virtual world for now, I suppose. But interestingly, Roblox has kind of come out, if I have my facts right here, and said they're not really interested in Web3. They kind of, they have this currency internally. They want to kind of keep it inside the platform. They don't see a need, at least not right now, to incorporate a blockchain into that currency or into the digital products they have inside the worlds. So I'm personally, just to kind of be candid, I'm skeptical about the tie-in. I'm interested in both, but skeptical that they really need to be connected to one another. But maybe I'm wrong. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, well, first of all, I would say with Roblox, I think Roblox is like a Web 2.5 company today, like not a 3, not a 2, but they're like a 2.5 company today. I don't know where they are today, but I know they were looking at some integration with NFTs and Web3. That could have changed. So you might have better data than I do. But regardless of what technology they're using, I do think that they are creating the future of what a digital first environment looks like. And I do think it could be what the metaverse does eventually end up like, where you can, it's so easy, right? I mean, I think that's one of the things that I see as a blocker today for Web3 and the metaverse. Roblox is so easy. I can go in and do it. My kids can go in and do it. It's just an easy way to get started. There's value in there through the social networks, right? I mean, the real value is not that you're in the metaverse. It's about all the people that you meet and the social friends that you make, the communities, back to the communities that you're a part of in that. Forever 21 built their whole vision on Roblox, which I think is very powerful. So I take my hats off to Roblox because I think they are the future. Again, Web 2.5, I think, could be Web 3.0. And I think we could all take many lessons for it. I'll just give you one story, which I think is really funny. So I was teaching a class in the Metaverse, and it was using another platform. I won't say which platform, because as I was teaching the class, I'm a adjunct professor at Carnegie Mellon, Silicon Valley. A professor decided to come in, and I was like, "Hey, do you want me to teach you how to do your avatar and how to get around?" And he was like, No, I got it. So on the day I'm teaching the class, he comes in and he gets stuck up on the ceiling. He couldn't figure out how to get his avatar down. When he finally got his avatar down, his avatar fell into a pool of water, and then he couldn't figure out how to get himself out. So it was horrible. Now, this is a really smart professor who was having problems getting around in the metaverse. That's not the metaverse we need, right? We need something like Roblox, which is really easy, really simple, right? We were joking at ECC, John, about how we should go and steal a bunch of Apple designers and bring them over to Web3 because that would accelerate us really quickly. But that is what we need. We need more usability, friendliness, not all these terms that nobody understands. It just needs to be open and inclusive for everybody to really get to widespread adoption.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think I think it was one of our other guests, Lewis, on the show, He said something like, technology has kind of hit mainstream once people stop talking about it. Like once it becomes, it just sort of, I don't say, I'm going to text message you on my iPhone. Like I just say, hey, I sent you this thing, or, where are you going to be late? I mean, it's like once it kind of fades into the background and it just becomes that seamless and usable, that's when, people that aren't necessarily at the beginning of the curve or kind of nerdy and like really into this stuff, they're just go, okay, good, I'll just use it now. Like, and that's where it just takes on. So I agree. I think we've got a little ways.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. It was when he said that, I was like, wow, yeah, that does track for me. So let's get into a book that you're releasing. I think it's going to be out by the time this show releases. So it covers, I think, a lot of these topics, but what's the headline?
So the book I wrote is called The Tiger and the Rabbit, and it dives into how to approach artificial intelligence, the metaverse, and Web3. I think all three of these are going to converge over time. I know Europe is already calling that Web4, where all of them do converge, which I think is quite interesting. The title is the Tiger and the Rabbit because one of the big themes of the book is for large Web2 companies, how do you start looking at these new technologies? And I started, as I was doing research for the book, John, I got a lot of questions about, wow, Sandy, I love your question. Like, how do I look at these new technology? But there's always going to be new technologies. Tell me what I should do to always stay ahead of the curve. And so I started thinking about that, looking at some of the best companies, and found that a rabbit team, not a tiger team, but a rabbit team was the best way to stay in front of all of this. And what I mean by that is, a tiger team, I've been on many of those at IBM and Amazon, and even some, that were co-companies with Microsoft. And a tiger team is usually set up to solve a problem. You get together, you have a cross-functional team, and then you disperse because you've solved the problem. But with emerging tech, it's going faster and faster and faster. And so what I really would like to see are rabbit teams that are fast, that are, going down the rabbit hole, going deep, but also staying in tune to the new technology, right? Because if you had been so focused on Web3 and the metaverse, you might have missed the new thing with AI. And because they're linked, like you can create an AI avatar, you can do social verification, you would have missed it. And so I had talked about this rabbit team. So that's why it's called The Tiger and the Rabbit. It is written as a business fable. So I find that really interesting too, which means it's a whole bunch of stories. I have characters in the book, which was really hard to write, by the way. That makes it a little fun. And I was trying to make it easy. Back to our easy discussion, was trying to describe all these terms and everything and make it easy in a dialogue and a way that you could easily digest what was happening.
That's awesome.
I'm really excited that it's coming out. It's already doing pretty well on the charts. It's just pre-orders right now, but we've already got some really nice pre-orders coming in. And I'd love to hear any of your listeners or viewers' feedback on it as well, because it is a different kind of book.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. I love the idea of that format. I've read a few other books that kind of do a similar thing, and I always find that compelling because otherwise business books can be you got to force your way through some of them. So it's nice to have a narrative and characters and things like that. So that's awesome. I'm curious on the rabbit concept. So is this then a team that basically stays intact, unlike kind of a skunk works, like build it project, we delivered it, we went to the garage for 9 months, here it is, and then we all go back to our day jobs? Is the idea that it's a team that like just kind of stays, they bounce around, but they stay kind of on the cutting edge of whatever's next?
Yeah. And yes, and there are many companies who do this today really, really well. It's interesting because Pepsi did this. They called it something else, but Pepsi is quoted after they read the book. They changed the name of their team to a rabbit team. Because what they do is, as a consumer goods company, is they have a team that studies new technologies and how they can use it for a business outcome. It's all focused on business outcome. And so they stay up to date on everything. And when I when I shared this concept with them, they're like, we're renaming our team, which I thought was super cool, because a rapid team's got to be fast. It's got to be nimble. When something new comes in, it's got to take it in, but it's always got to also be focused on the business value, not just tech for tech's sake as well.
Yeah, that's super cool. That makes a ton of sense to me. That's great. I'm looking forward to reading it. I want to kind of wrap up here, talking a little bit more about unstoppable domains. What should people know? How can they find out more? Get in touch with you or the company?
Yeah, Unstoppable Domains is a Web3 digital identity platform, and it's an identity that travels with you through the internet. So what that means is that you can log into applications with one ID, like Sandy.x, for example. I can use that to transact, do business, purchase something with it. I can do it to send email. I can use it for a website. There's so much power in what you can do with it. We have 3.7 million digital identities out there today in the wild. And what we've been focused on is utility. I think you said earlier, you talked about the hype, but we believe that utility is greater than hype. So we've done about 870 integrations, and each of those integrations provides value. You can use that identity with them. You own your data, so all the data associated with that is yours. So it really helps kind of get us into this next transitional mode, if you would, as well. So that's what Unstoppable Domains are. We would love for you to come to our site. It's unstoppabledomains.com. Follow us on Twitter at Unstoppable Web, not domains, on Twitter, and learn a little bit more about it. We've tried to make it really easy to understand the concept, but a lot of Web2 brands, about 11% of all Web2 brands in the Fortune 100 have already gotten their unstoppable digital identity, preparing for the future. So get ready now for what's to come in the future.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, I'm going to have to go get mine. My assumption is John is already taken, so I'll have to come up with something a little more creative than that.
But if you find what you want, and I'll see if I can get it for you.
Okay, good. I will let you know. Sandy, this has been fascinating. Really appreciate you being on.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always fun to chat, and thanks for the great questions as well.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nexus Project. If we referenced anything in terms of links, etc., they should be in the show notes. Make sure to subscribe so you get all the episodes in your feed. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a rating or review, that would be super helpful. Last but not least, share this with a friend or a colleague that you think might get value out of it. And I will see you on the next episode.